Most people are not losing because life is impossible. They're losing because they make every little moment mean too much. An awkward conversation, a bad week, a failed attempt, no progress. A weird look from somebody, one mistake in public, one low performing post, one day where they don't feel sharp. And now suddenly in their mind, everything is collapsing. That's why one of the most useful mindset shifts you can make is this: start looking at your life from a third person perspective. Because when you're too emotionally inside the moment, you stop seeing clearly. But when you step outside of yourself for even a second, your judgment gets better immediately. And in today's world, this matters more than ever. Because people are constantly in their own heads now. Everything is overanalyzed, everything gets replayed, everything feels personal. Everything feels like it says something deep about who you are. And most of the time, it doesn't. It was just a moment. That's it. But when you're trapped in first person, a moment doesn't feel like a moment. It feels like a statement. It feels like an identity. It feels like proof. Proof you're awkward. Proof you're behind. Proof you're not good enough. Proof people are judging you. Proof you should stop. And that's where people start ruining their own momentum. Because they don't just experience the moment, they attach to it. Let's say, for example, Bob has an awkward conversation at work. Maybe he says something weird. Maybe the timing is off. Maybe the energy feels strange. Maybe he walks away thinking, why did I say like that? If Bob stays in first person, his mind starts spiraling. That was bad. I sounded stupid. Why did I do that? They probably think I'm weird. Now tomorrow is going to be awkward. Now I have to overcompensate. Now I have to fix it. See what happened there? Nothing major even happened yet, but his ego got involved. So now the moment has grown way bigger than what it actually was. Now let's switch it. Bob steps outside of himself and looks at it in third person. Bob had an awkward conversation. Was it the cleanest moment of his life? No. Is that normal? Yes. In the grand scheme of things, what does it really affect? Not much. Will people probably move on faster than Bob thinks? Yes. Now the moment gets seen for what it actually is. Not a crisis, not a character flaw, not some life-defining embarrassment, just an awkward moment. And that right there is the advantage. The third person perspective doesn't make life perfect, it makes life accurate. That's the real win, because most people do not suffer only from the event, they suffer from the story they create around the event. And that's why the same thing can happen to two different people, and one moves on in 5 minutes while the other thinks about it for 3 days. The difference is not always toughness. A lot of the time, it's perspective. One person takes the moment at face value, the other person turns it into a personal attack on their identity. And this doesn't only apply to awkward conversations. It applies to failure. It applies to pressure. It applies to not seeing progress. It applies to uncomfortable decisions. It applies to almost everything. Take failure. Somebody starts something new. Maybe it's the gym. Maybe it's content. Maybe it's a business idea. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe it's a new skill. They try, they fail, or they don't progress as quickly as they wanted. Now, in first person, the mind gets emotional. Maybe I'm not built for this. Maybe I'm too late. Maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe I'm just not the person. But in third person, a person tried something difficult. They are early in the process. They are just not great yet. That is normal. What would give them the best chance to improve now? Completely different energy. Now you're not drowning in emotion. Now you're solving. What's the whole point? Third person perspective helps you move from reaction to response, from ego to logic, from spiraling to seeing, from feeling attacked by life to actually handling life. And honestly, this is one of the reasons people are able to give great advice to others, but struggle to follow the same advice themselves. Because when it's someone else, your ego isn't involved. You can see the situation clean. You can say, relax. It's one awkward moment. It's one setback. It's one bad week. Keep going. But when it's your life, suddenly everything feels heavier. Why? Because now emotion is attached. Now pride is attached. Now identity is attached. And once identity gets attached, clear thinking starts leaving the room. That's why I think one of the strongest mental skills a person can build is the ability to step outside of themselves in real time and ask, what is actually happening here? Not what does my pride think is happening? Not does what my insecurity want to turn this into? What is actually happening here? That question alone can save people from so much unnecessary suffering. Because sometimes what actually happens is you had a weird interaction, you're learning, you feel pressure because you care, you're uncomfortable because it's new, you're frustrated because progress is slower than expected, you made a mistake. That's very different from the dramatic version the mind creates. And that's what modern life does to people. It makes them hyper aware, hyper self-conscious, hyper reactive, especially now when everything feels visible. People are constantly imagining how they look, how they sounded, how they came across, what people might think, whether they're behind, whether they're winning enough, whether their life looks impressive enough. So now even small moments feel loaded. And when everything feels loaded, you become mentally exhausted. That's why the third person perspective is so powerful. It removes the extra weight you keep adding. It lets the moment be the moment, nothing more. And once you can do that, you stop grabbing every experience like it has to become a problem. That awkward moment, it passes. That pressure before doing something uncomfortable, normal. That bad result, information. That slow progress, part of the process. That weird day, just a day. You stop building these emotional monuments out of temporary moments, and that changes everything. Because when you can see clearly, you make better choices. You don't overreact. You don't hide. You don't quit too early. You don't assume the worst. You don't let one feeling decide the whole direction of your life. You assess, you respond, you keep moving. And I think that's what maturity really looks like. Not never feeling emotions, but not letting emotions completely distort reality. Because emotions are real, but they are not always truthful in the way they present things. They make things feel final when they're not final. They make things feel bigger when they're not bigger. They make things feel more personal than they really are. Third person perspective gives you distance, and distance gives you power. Because once you stop standing so close to every little thing, you finally start seeing the full picture. So the next time you're in an awkward moment, or you feel pressure, or something doesn't go your way, or you're frustrated because progress is taking too long, stop and pull back. Look at it like you're watching it happen. Bob had an awkward conversation. Bob feels pressure before this big moment. Bob is not seeing progress right now. Bob made a mistake. Bob feels embarrassed. Okay, now ask the real questions. How bad is this really? Is this normal? In the grand scheme of things, what does this actually affect? What is the smartest move from here? That is where the power is. Because once you remove ego, emotion, and panic from the driver's seat, you make better decisions almost automatically. And that's why third person perspective works. Not because it makes you cold, not because it makes you robotic, but because it lets you see the truth without all the extra noise. And a lot of people don't need a whole new life. They need a clear lens. They need to stop making every moment mean everything. Because it doesn't. Some things are just moments. They pass, you learn, you move on. That's the win.